I remember sitting there handcuffed in jail. I remember just sitting in the cell meditating. I chose this over my brother. He was my best friend.
I would call that the season of nervous system regulation.
I remember special moments with people I love. I remember surprise things that I would do for people. I remember some of the painful moments too.
It might be interesting to hear the story of people that want kids that can't have them.
The grief is more like, what's my legacy? Who am I sharing this with? Who am I sharing time with? What if God has a different plan to be a father? Oh man, I got a ton of grief I haven't dealt with. Such a great jumping off point. What does it look like if you're broken and whole? I have all this love to give. Who do I get to give the love to?
I feel like, can you talk a little bit about, I realize that the subject matter of all of this, by the way, we could travel down multiple roads and talk about different things, but the word that comes up for me is grief. And I know this is a big word for you with your brother's death. That was something that you took a deep look into grief and then started serving men in this way through years of work. And then you released a movie about it that I just was able to watch with you months ago. Which also, talking about like the dominoes that tip and you know they lead to most beautiful things. There was a buddy in the room as we were watching the movie, probably 20, 25 people in the room, I'm guessing, somewhere like that. And one of the guys, one of our friends, made a comment at one moment in that movie about wondering what was possible for him if he were to explore grief and with the work of men together. And that led to you and I crafting an experience just recently, weeks ago, for one of our buddies. I love to see all this, man. I love to see how the dots are being connected. And all of that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for your movie. And that event for our friend, for our mutual friend, as in his words, was one of the most profound experiences of his life. So back to you and this movie and how it came to be. Talk to me, if you can, and there may be a more eloquent way of asking this question, but tell me about grief. What is grief? How do you define it? And why did you put so much time and energy into this? Why did you make this movie?
Yes, so the natural response to loss is heartbreak. And the way we move through heartbreak is grief. To broaden that, most people, when they think of grief, think about losing the loved one, which is probably the most common. But if we broaden that even wider, think about all the changes we go through in life. How often do we fall in love with something? Our parents are going to be together forever, and then they get divorced. My friends are going to take care of me, and then we get shamed or bullied or beat up. My body's going to stay the same, and then we get older and the body starts changing. We fall in love. The relationships go through seasons or changes. You know, moving from a single parent to a father or a mother. That's a whole transformation where you're not the single guy a lot of guys struggle with and have grief over, now I'm in this new role, or when the kids move out of the house and they're an empty nester. So there's so many ways. The most inconspicuous version of that is when we fall in love with the fantasy. Like some people will fall in love with, I had a vision I was going to be married with kids and then they don't have it. Or I had a vision I was going to be a millionaire and I lost my money. Or whatever it is, we fall in love with these things in life and then we lose it. And so there is so much grief and we're not taught to deal with it. In fact, a metaphor I like to use is, how do we come into this world? Right? We're in this nice little plump little sack. All of our needs are met. The food's coming in. We're just relaxing. We fall in love with this first world. And then our day into entering this world, do we come in smiling and laughing and giggling, or do we come in grieving, crying? And so I believe it's the fundamental skill that we need to know as humans to live really healthy, full lives. And so to broaden that, grief is really our heart. In order to do grief work, you have to move to the heart and learn to love things that can't be fixed. And that's really hard to do, especially for men. When we've been taught any area that I show emotion, I'm shamed or bullied or attacked. So we've learned to armor up. And it's a little harder for us naturally to do emotions than it is women, because their brains go back and forth, emotion, rational logic, versus we have to like slow down to go from our single-minded focus on whatever we're hunting to like, oh, let me single-mindedly go in and feel. So from my lens now, grief is the fundamental root cause of all addictions, all suffering, the reason we can't achieve our goals in any area of life. And it's really the parts of ourself that we can't understand, our relationship dynamics, why we fight with our spouses, why we have internal conflict with ourselves. Like if we really break it all apart at the root layer, there's grief, oftentimes from childhood, that's unprocessed, that's blocking us from our heart. Mm-hmm. So learning to get really loving and gentle to be with the grief, feel the grief, move the grief, connects us back with our heart so that we can love again in the simplest version. So we fall deeply in love, that's taken from us. Allowing ourselves to grieve that heartbreak allows us to come back in our heart so that we can love again. And the reason I spent a decade shooting a film was my brother. My brother had come to me, which again, I told you the childhood we had, me and my brother were together all the time. So we got really close. And I'd say like he was my best friend. And so then he came to me, he had an addiction, came to me for help, said, hey man, things have gotten tough. I'm shooting needles. I got to come live with you or I'm going to die if I go back to Reno. And I told him no, because I had a startup. That was my focus at the time. And 2 days later, he went back and died of a heroin overdose. And as a dude, I found out about it, cried, and then put it in a box, flew home, took care of the service, came back and just built the company, which we, just as it started reaching success and having 6-figure months, 2008 hit. Came crashing down. So all of a sudden one day I came home to find business partner running off with my girlfriend. So in one moment I lost my business partner, who was my best friend, my girlfriend, because they ran off together, my business. I had to go through bankruptcy because he took the company and took off. And I didn't feel like fighting him and all the mess. And so I just said, I'll restart. And I'll tell one extra story. There was some buddies that were like, hey man, come get your mind off things, come party. Long story short, I somehow ended up trying to help a buddy's girlfriend, but I don't need to get into the details, where I found myself in jail. And I remember sitting there handcuffed in jail. Like I felt like I was naked, like my whole body was laying there naked and I was getting kicked. Like that's the only thing externally. My world felt so raw that I was like, I remember just sitting in the cell meditating because I was like, I can't even deal with the outside world. And I remember sitting in that cell, that's when it really hit me. I'm sitting there like, oh, I chose this over my brother. And so that realization sent me on this huge trajectory into solve it, because I was a fixer. I was going to fix it and find the solution. And initially I went to go work with Tony Robbins, learned a bunch of transformational tools, and grief and loss kept showing up. So I really believe on our purpose, like it's already destined, is one of my pieces. I think it's just so close to us, we don't often see it. It's like so embedded, we don't notice it. So we have to get really present and look for the subtleties that are already around us. And people kept showing up around grief and loss and death. And I remember saying like, what would it look like if I just went into this? And so that's what started this. Actually, there's a other piece of that story. I'd just done another startup company. So my story was filled with so much loss, so much fucking loss, right? Like if I look back, so I have friends that just hit it. Mine was like destruction, rebuild. Yeah. And I remember I spent 7 years on this startup company. We sold it for 20 million, but then it was a stock deal. So no cash got transferred. And I remember I was living startup life that whole time. I would have made multiple 7 figures. And I remember being like, I'm back at it, zero again. And I chose such solid partners. They'd all had multiple $100 million exits. Like it was like, and I remember sitting there, I was like, all right, God, like, what am I going to actually remember at the end of my life? And I sat down and I journaled and I was like, I remember special moments with people I love. I remember surprise things that I would do for people. I remember some of the painful moments too, but I started remembering, I was like, currently my life looks like working around the clock, 24 hours a day. You know, that's an exaggeration, but like night, evening, weekends. And I'm like, I don't remember any of those memories on the end of my life. Why am I spending all my life doing this? Mm-hmm. And the next thing I did is I was like, what was I given? Like, what did God give me? And I was like, I came into this world optimistic. Like ever since I was a little kid, I didn't learn that. That's not a skill I learned. Like I came in seeing the glass half full. So I was like, all right, that's what I was given, not what I developed. And then I remember asking, what would I do if I had no fear? Like no fear. And I really sat with that question for a while. Like if I had no fear, because whatever I'm doing, I'm going in, working around the clock, learning every tool I can, and I'm failing. So maybe you have a bigger plan for me. Like what would I do? What would you have me do? And I sat there and I thought I would take what I was naturally given, this optimistic, looking at the, the brighter side of things, and I'd put it in the darkest place I could find, which was grief and death. Because I wouldn't care about money. I wouldn't care about what it looked like. I would just be like, I'd take what I was given and I'd put it in a place to create a little bit more levity in the darkest place I could think of. And so that's when the moment that I decided, all right, this is where I'm going to go into. And at that point is when I started to want to help people. So I got on grief forums and I was like, I'm Mr. Tony Robbins. I learned all his tools. I'm going to help anybody fix their grief. And I just failed miserably at first. Like I remember I got on, there was I was reading through these grief forums and there's just so many stories. And I remember there was a woman, I'm probably won't get into the details because they're pretty horrific, but the cliff notes were, the father came home to find his daughter hanged herself, was so distraught he went in the garage, took his own life.
Oh my God.
And the wife was on the forum trying to piece her life together again because she still had another daughter. And she's like, I would take my life too, but I need to stay alive for her. And I'm like, I'll help you. Thinking I got all the tools and just failed. I mean, so sensitive, right? And I'm like, I can't just jump in and try to help them. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And the other thing I thought was interesting, there was another guy that just went through a breakup and they had the same symptoms. So I'm like, oh, here's this horrific story. And there's this guy that went through a breakup. In my mind, I was like, this is much worse than this.
Sure.
Yet symptomatically, they had the same symptoms. And I was like, all right, I'll try to help you. Failed with both of them. That's a good key theme that was a lot of my earlier life. And then I was like, all right, maybe I don't know about grief. And so I started researching the top grief experts and realizing even the top experts, this was in 2013 when I started, couldn't agree on like, are we naturally resilient? We don't need anything. Is there complicated grief in this whole other condition that's now in the DSM-5? They can prescribe you meds for having complicated grief, which wasn't it back then, but I set out on a journey to really say, I'm going to find out. I don't know. And
you're not like most men. You don't just scroll, you study. You don't just parent, you lead. And you don't just read, you implement. And that's why we made this, a no-fluff, battle-tested list of books that sharpen men like you. Picked by our tribe, proven in real life, these books are going to stretch your mind, fuel your growth, and challenge who you thought you had to be. These aren't just great reads. They're tools to help you grow as a father, husband, and a man. Get the list and all the insights that bring it to life at frontrowdads.com/books.
Met up with a buddy who also lost his brother, who was a cinematographer, and we just started interviewing experts, thinking I was going to help them heal their grief. I'm like, I'm going to help you heal your grief. And really quickly along that journey, I realized, oh man, I got a ton of grief I haven't dealt with.
Yeah.
I just put it in a box and
ignored it. When did you realize that? How did you realize that? Like, because maybe somebody's listening going, I don't know if I've got grief. Have I dealt with it? Maybe it's there. How would I know? How does it manifest?
The way it showed up for me is in one of my interviews, there was a guy named Ken Druck, who's still a mentor of mine and just the most loving man. I mean, he was really a psychologist that came up around Tony Robbins and a lot of the top coaches at that time. And his daughter died in an accident in China, and they had such a close connection that he was just distraught. So his own death led him into the grief space. And he's the guy that goes into 9/11, Boston bombing, Sandy Hook shootings, dealing with families for 20 years. So now it's been 30 years plus, but when I interviewed him, I could feel the pain in his eyes, and his level of authority was so certain, but was so loving and gentle. And I remember he made this comment that our grief, like oftentimes in personal development, we're not broken. So much of it's like, you're not broken, you're whole. You're not broken, you're whole. And he brought this new concept of like, we're broken and whole. And he described it like this: when you fall deeply in love and something's taken from you, your heart's crushed into a million pieces. So you are totally heartbroken. You're heartbroken. And we live in a world of duality. So to think that you're just whole completely without accepting the heartbreak makes you choose. And that's where most people are struggling with, because they're like, oh, I'm not heartbroken. I'm fixed. I'm better again. I'm whole. But in creating more space to be human, what does it look like if you're broken and whole? And whole means I'm a whole human. I'm a warrior. I'm courageous, but I have deep heartbreak. I have deep grief that my heart's been shattered into a million pieces. And so the interview with him really like it was so potent. I walked out of there like I couldn't not see it. So it was almost like, where am I still broken? Because all the personal development is you're not broken. You need to be whole. So I was running from anything that felt uncomfortable, weak, even like think of masculine lineage. We're taught like, don't show any vulnerability or weakness because you get attacked. So like most of our lives is armoring up to not show any weakness and to be whole, to cover it up. To most men that I see that struggle with making a lot of money are running from their inadequacy wounds. So they're trying to feel adequate enough because what would happen if I'm inadequate? But it's so conditioned into our psyche. We don't even see it. We just want to keep winning until we look around and go, I won, but I look around and it didn't feel good. So what's the next big thing? Or there's somebody bigger is an inadequacy wound that's running. And so until we stop, either if something forces us, like a divorce, a health injury, an addiction that takes us to our knees, until something forces us to take a look at that, oftentimes men will keep running and until they find it. But luckily I was in a place where that insight forced me to go, where am I still broken? Yeah. And then I was like, all my past heartbreaks. I thought I fixed my brother. I was like, I'm still in a lot of grief with my brother. It just showed me all the areas. And at the time I had some addictive behaviors. So, I'd be working really hard. And then all of a sudden one day I'd go get a tub of ice cream, a pizza, a bottle of wine, devour all of them, and then watch porn all night. And then I'd feel a lot of shame and just rinse, repeat, like, how did I do that? And so I started to learn like, that's covering up the grief.
Right.
Like there's something underneath that I haven't learned tools to access. And so I think that was really the awakening for the guys that are listening for broader symptoms, addictions, depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, like men who are like, fuck the sunset. I don't have time for a sunset. Because they're so busy going, like they don't have spaciousness. They can't just relax into the moment. They have to be really busy. So busy hiding behind our businesses or our companies or our projects or going to kicking the can outside at the house is a common one. I'm going to go work on the sprinkler. But we're always busy doing something because if we took a couple minutes to just be with ourselves, all this stuff's going to bubble up. So we stay busy. Conflict in relationships. I really see most of the conflict in relationships is due to unprocessed grief from our past that our nervous system is trying to protect us from. And so we move into survival patterns with our relationships. So we're in fight, flight, freeze, and appease constantly. 80% of conflict I find is nervous system, but beneath it is the wound of inadequacy or abandonment that's triggered. And then our nervous systems are fighting. So that's why I say any conflict, most all conflicts with spouses, there's probably some past grief from one or the other or both. Struggling to make money is typically wounding around father dynamics or some sort of past wound around our relationship with money, grief tied to that we're either overcompensating or avoiding. Our health and our body, it's a key area that we inhale a lot of food to protect our bodies. So oftentimes when we gain a lot of weight, we don't want to feel we're too vulnerable. So it's we're packing on grief to protect ourselves. So when we start to look at that landscape, most of the things that we struggle with, I find, are due to unprocessed, unfelt, unacknowledged grief that's stuck in the body and is just metastating. Anger. One other one is like anger when we blow out and react, or I look at it like that grief bubbles up and it's like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And then if we don't let the pressure out, then it comes out sideways on the people usually that we love. So those are just like some of the top layer symptoms.
So I'd imagine that most people are not talking about this routinely. Imagine most people, it's not like somebody's checking in every week or month going, hey man, do you have any grief that we need to work on and process? It's probably not, unless they're in an amazing group like that like one of the ones you created that specifically brings this into focus, right, for these guys. So how would somebody go about, like, let's say they do understand what you're saying and they identify they've got some grief, that maybe is unresolved, or they got a sense that that's what's happening. What do they do? Like, who do they go talk to? Do they hire a therapist? Do they watch your movie? Do they get a coach? Do they sit in a journal and say, where is my grief and how do I get through it? Like, what's their next step?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to start first with nervous system. So for me, stabilization of the nervous system is step one, because our nervous system is reactive. And until we can get present, we can't actually invite that in, because our reactive patterns are our nervous system. And so most of the things we're doing that are blocking us from being present to access the grief is the nervous system trying to protect us from it. So first, they would want to regulate their nervous system and stabilize it. So, just to give 5 quick key ways to do it. One is just 4-6 breathing for 6 minutes, meaning they would breathe in for a count of 4, out for a count of 6, but for 6 minutes. So I would say if they started doing that daily, like when I coach, they have to do that daily. We don't coach, because if they do, then they get more gas in the tank.
Yeah.
So think of it as emotional capacity. And if I want to deal with grief, I have to have emotional capacity to deal with it. But if I'm taking on so much from my life and I have very little capacity, I do not have the energy to actually feel and address and move that grief out of me. So I have to get stabilized first. So if they were to just start doing 4-6 breathing, I would recommend twice a day. In the morning to start their day, put gas in their truck so they got gas to go on their journey. And then when they reintegrate back home, so they're present with their family. 4 other ways to do that is cold immersion. That's why I love cold plunging. Less for the cold benefits, more for the regulation benefits. Vocal sounds, chanting, singing, humming, things to get in their voice. Exercise, and then physical contact. But I use the breath as the primary because I know it works, and I've just consistently seen it work the most. So first, they would get stabilized with their nervous system. Second, they can go get support. But not a lot of people actually know how to deal with grief, unfortunately. Most of the doctors I interviewed had one class. So the predominant who prescribes antidepressants is doctors, and most of them have had one class on grief, and they don't know what it is. So they're trying to put a Band-Aid on it. So that's part of the challenge, is you have to find coaches, therapists, programs, events, things that are familiar with getting in the body and moving it. So think of embodiment type practices. One of the guys I interviewed, Paul Dennison with Grief Yoga, are just think of it as yoga exercises, but you're making sounds and movements to get in the body. Most grief is stuck in the center column. So they could work with Paul Dennison. They could find different resources around grief, or they could just start to get into somatics. So somatics are really get out of the here, because when they're trying to understand grief, they're in here. We got to get into the body. So they could do an anger practice for 30 days. Where they just say, hey, I'm going to get on my bed. I'm going to create a little sacred space. I'm going to put on some Rage Against the Machine, and I'm going to give 5 minutes of or one song of offloading anything I'm mad about. And then afterward, I'm going to turn around, maybe be a little light on the vocal cords. So maybe use your body, but you throw these out pretty quickly. So, and then turn around and just feel your heart underneath and what was underneath that anger. Because usually we have a harder time accessing grief than anger. And anger is the bodyguard to grief and sadness. So those could be just a couple actionable things that guys can do. But really getting in the body is how we start to feel and move the grief. But understanding maybe say it a different way. Another strategy I teach is called CPR. And so I work with a lot of firefighters and veterans. And so they use CPR when somebody's unconscious and they need to resuscitate them. So if you can stabilize your nervous system, the key is you can start to see when you're dysregulated.
Right.
So as an example, if I'm overworking, all of a sudden I'm on my phone. Just because I do this, I fall off just like anybody else. So even though I teach it, I still fall off. And if I have a really busy week or if I'm traveling, that's when I usually catch my all of a sudden I'll be really busy. I'm on my phone late at night, but there's nothing really going on. I feel like I don't have enough time to get everything done. So I'm almost like, oh, there's no time. Yet I'm sitting there doing tasks, but I'm not doing the things that I need to do. So there's this dysregulated symptom. It could be food, addictions, other things as well. But if you see it, that's the conscious awareness. The C is conscious awareness that I'm dysregulated. The P is pause, literally stop. And the R is go regulate. So literally another metaphor is you're taking a axe and you're trying to chop down a tree. Well, and it's got a dull blade and you're just hitting it harder and harder and harder and it's making no progress. Build time to go sharpen your axe. So regulation is, let me go take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go regulate.
You really brought that to my world, man. I didn't know a lot about that before we met. That was, I would call that the season of nervous system regulation. It just wasn't even part of my vocabulary prior to us talking about it and exploring that. And since then, I've poured a lot more time and energy to understand it. I'm wondering, with all the nervous system work that you've done, do you find it harder to watch violent movies
Oh yeah.
than when you were younger?
I have shifted and I've done a lot of intimacy work too. So like, I find the deeper I go into my own grief work, the deeper I want to go into my heart versus being shut down and disconnected. And then I'm more sensitive to my actual environment and my nervous system. So like, I've been always an action guy. So I would watch action movies at night.
Yes.
War movies, action movies. Like that was my relaxation.
Yeah. That's how you relaxed.
Yeah. Like I'll watch a war movie and I cry, I get emotional. Like it's such a good story. But I started noticing at bedtime that was a coping mechanism that I actually get dysregulated.
Yeah.
And so now I watch rom-coms and other type films that I notice bring a lighter texture to the heart that are softer or even make me laugh. Yeah. Which has been a whole big shift because I don't think I ever watched a rom-com till 2 years ago.
Romantic comedy, right?
Romantic comedy till 2 years ago. Yeah. And I was like,
dude, I went to the movies last night with Tiger and we saw the Jason Statham movie Working Man. You know, this new.
How was it?
I mean, for an action movie, it's very Jason Statham. It's, you know, it's like, I was looking at myself watching the movie going, dude, you love this kind of movie, you know? But then also paying attention to the fact that I was like, man, there's a lot of violence, right? And I walked out and I remember saying to Tiger, I mean, it might be just me being 49 years old and, you know, having some more emotional awareness of myself, but I don't necessarily love that anymore. Was it not, you know, just, I even in the middle of the movie, I thought, I think my like action movie era is coming to maybe not to an end. Maybe I'll still see a movie here or there, but I don't crave it like I used to. I would wake up in the morning at 5:30 and I would, you know, sit on the couch and I would put on a James Bond movie with headphones and get my day going with email and tasks, and I'd be doing my calendar, and I loved it. I wanted to be amped. I wanted to feel the adrenaline. Oh, that matched the intensity of how I wanted to live my life. And now it doesn't. I want to wake up and sit on my couch in total silence and try to observe my thoughts and feel my body. And I'm trying to calm everything down. And partially, that is because I experienced physical challenges, like my like the inflammation markers in my blood work are crazy high. And I'm like, what do I need to change? Because maybe without the blood work, without the, hey, something could be wrong, maybe I would just still be fully addicted. Maybe not, but maybe. And now I'm asking myself, what health benefits come from emotional regulation? And also with my kids, how much better of a dad I am when I'm emotionally regulated. Like if I wake up and I crank email and watch an action film, I'm probably a different dad at breakfast than if I wake up and meditate and clear my mind, you know, and pour love into myself. I'm probably there's a frequency that shifts.
Well, think of it as dysregulation, we're in reaction. Regulation, we're present.
Yeah.
Like what's the best gift you can give your kiddos is your presence. Whereas a lot of us think it's our money and this, back to the inadequacy conversation. I got to give them enough. But really, we are enough now if we're just present with them, right? And so that's the biggest thing that I'm hearing in you. And it's the same thing I've seen in myself of just like, I want to be more present with my life. Yeah. Like where'd 15 years go?
For sure.
Where was I at? What was I doing? Like waking up to kind of go, oh, I want to live in the resiliency zone, which is that present space where you get to feel good.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to be able to feel your body. Most men are living in here. So most men are living in their heads. And they're trying to understand their world from their heads. They're not feeling how their body's feeling, which requires being regulated. And so if you're and two things, regulation brings awareness, but then you have to do the work to go in and feel that, which creates space. So as you're talking through that, you've not only done regulation practices, but you've been doing things to feel the space. I mean, meditation's another great tool of just observing our thoughts, right? And getting back to the body. But think of that spaciousness gives us more capacity. So if I had a bucket and I had big rocks in the bucket, you've been removing more and more and more rocks. So not only can you handle the stress from your day, but Tiger walks in upset. do we snap as quickly, or do we have a little bit more space to go, let me be a little bit more present? Or when a pattern's happening over and over again, we can say, hey, I've been looping the same pattern. Let me try something different.
Yeah.
Let me try a different result. That's all regulation strategies that give us our life back. Like, that's kind of how I look at it. Like, do I want to be living my life presently, or do I want to look back and go, what happened to my whole?
Yeah, exactly.
What happened? So I love that. It sounds like, I'd say a couple more things for me is, like, I have non-negotiables in the morning and the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I wake up, same thing. I have non-negotiables of what I do when I start. And then in the evening, I find is where I actually get dysregulated. So I have to reintegrate back to myself in the evening from a busy day.
Yeah.
And that really helps a lot. Just like creating time. I have a sound bed. I have a red light bed. I just kind of I get off my electronics at 7 and I have to go to the different beds and calm down. And then I can be present with my cats. I got cats. I don't have kids. But I can play with them in the yard. I can hang out with friends. Like, I just put other boundaries on myself that I notice don't attune the nervous system. I don't take calls after a certain time, because even if I love who I'm talking to, I'm wired. So just noticing what wires us and what actually relaxes us so that we can have a good sleep.
Yeah. You, one more question on the movie, which is, what did you want it to do in the world? Like, you were committed to this thing for a decade. It's a beautiful film, and I'm really impressed. What do you hope it does? Why were you committed to finishing this piece of art?
I think it was, now looking back, it was my healing process.
Yeah.
And during it, I had, of course, big hopes of what I was going to do. And my mind was even tied to the finances. But I was just obsessed with filming. I couldn't stop hiring videographers and just documenting my journey. And then there's a scene in the film where I do a forgiveness scene on myself that my community actually did for me. Mm-hmm. And I woke up at that moment. Like, something actually woke me up. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like I'd had a realization that I'd blamed myself for my brother's death, that I never, here's the irony. I'd been leading forgiveness ceremonies for a decade. And for some reason, I felt safe enough, my body was ready enough, that I uncovered a new layer of actually feeling the grief, that I'd blamed myself for his death that was unconscious, but it was in my body. And it was like this deep grief that came bubbling out. And I literally was a different human after that. I was like...
And that was how long after his death?
He died in 2007, and that was 2022.
So I just want to...
15 years later.
Yeah, I want to bring attention to that fact that, this healing process and the grief work is not necessarily one that always remedies itself in a day or one counseling session or even in a year or years. And there's layers and layers and layers of that. I had this show up on a call the other day where I was exploring something in relationship to exploring my relationship to time. And specifically as it relates to my dad and what I learned from him about time, and Tatiana, and how in this coaching call was with other couples, and Tatiana and I were being the example in this moment of having a dialogue in front of the other couples. And I had an epiphany around time that I never had. And I'm, again, 49 years old. I've thought a lot about time as it relates to her and to my dad, but something became clear. And I think that's the most incredible thing, that you could be in the work, looking at it over and over and over again, and then like new breakthrough. Something happens. You're a totally different person. It's wild.
It is. And I think part of the challenge that I've had to go through is, in waking up, I was like, what happened the last 15 years? Like the hard realization the last 2 years has been like, where was I?
Right.
Like, literally, I woke up out of a grief coma. And I remember being like, now I'm 45. So that was 3 years ago. So I was 42, kind of going like, thought I'd have married and kids and family, still single. Like, where was I in my 30s when a lot of people are dating and doing relationship stuff, and I was working. I was dealing with my grief through service. Yeah. And it was a savior pattern. I was trying to save the world to make up for what I couldn't do with my brother. And that was 15 years of my life, And so looking back, waking up, it was like, oh, and it took me a year to two to kind of go, I have to grieve this. Yeah. I have to grieve and let go and accept where I'm at and accept the journey I've been on. And the grief actually brought me more into going, all right, how do I live now? How do I want to live the rest of my life as full as I can be now, without, because we're often, we get caught as we have back to the fantasy. I'd romanticize, I'm going to be married with kids. I'm going to have this family. I'm going to be doing the same thing I was taught. I'm going to be coaching my kids, doing all these things. And then I wake up one day and that's not here. So fantasy, if I had that I romanticized from a little kid, I fell in love with past the age that I thought it would happen. And unconsciously, I'd been punishing myself because the vision didn't happen. And then I was like, I got to make up for this, which was affecting my dating life because I wasn't relaxed and enjoying my life. I was like, oh, underneath, there was an unconscious anxiety. I've seen it happen in business in multiple areas, but recognizing it, seeing it, using the same tools to stabilize, like, what's there, and feeling it brought me back into center. Like, how do I just live my life really like the best for me now? Not with a partner, not with a certain amount of money, not with the family, like really just what lights me up.
Yeah.
And it came from, well, I have to be really regulated to do it.
Yeah.
And if I get really regulated, then I can start having fun and just doing things that bring a lot of enjoyment. And now I think that's what's landing is there's a relaxation.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I'm right on time wherever I'm at, which I think brings a lot of, I teach these 4 levels of loss. And the 4th one is like a deep loss. Like I use physical metaphors, but the 4th one is an amputation, loss of a limb. And so I'll give a quick one because we got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Level 1, I teach you to fire and police so that they can see what they're doing on the scene and they can communicate it at home. But level 1 would be like a blister or abrasion. So you got a blister on your foot. You can kind of ignore it. It's there. You can ignore it and it's not going to kill you, but it's going to be uncomfortable. But you can just ignore it. If you address it, it gets better quicker. Level 2 is like a sprained ankle. So if you sprain an ankle, have you ever got like a bad sprain where you're unconscious for 6 weeks, right? You're frustrated, you're angry, you're upset, but you look down and go, my leg, makes sense. Your spouses give you more grace because they're like, his leg, even though if you're an asshole, right? They're like, I understand it. But in 6 weeks later, you're back. With level 1 and level 2, you can do on your own. Level 3 is, let's say you shatter your leg, right? And let's say you just try to keep walking around. What happens? You keep re-breaking it.
Right.
So you actually can't do 3 on your own. You need help. So that would be the example, therapist, coach, somebody to help me work on emotionally putting myself back together again. And if we look at a shattered leg, it could take 3 to 6 months to heal after it's set and I go see somebody. And then you get the cast cut off and it could take another 3 to 6 months for rehabilitation. So you're a year or longer to actually get back to where you were, but you can get back to where you were if you get the help and you do the rehabilitation and you take care of yourself. So that could be the analogy of somebody listening going, I don't know what I may have, but if I start working with somebody, where do I have breaks that I haven't addressed that I can put myself back together again, that I can be totally whole at the end of this? Then you have a level 4, which is the loss of a leg. There is no fix. So for the rest of your life, you're going to have to accept. You may not have to accept how it happened or what happened, but you have to accept my leg is gone. And then you have to change your behavior. So the change might be, I'm going to go get a prosthetic. And I can give you a bunch of cases. I know a lot of veterans with lost limbs where they live just as full, maybe fuller of a life than they lived before. So you can still have a really full life, but it comes with accepting that you may wake up with days that you have grief for the rest of your life and just accepting that piece. Like this comes with the territory of my new life now. So level 4 losses are, it's only we know what a level 4 loss is. So you can't really, you can say big picture, but in general, somebody's breakup they may forget about, somebody else, one breakup may be with them for the rest of their life. So it's really what is still within us. And the way they can feel the difference is the stuff that are the level 4 doesn't go away. 3s do. 3s, you're like, okay, that's better now. 4s are still there and we carry them the rest of our lives. And so the only way to move through them is unconditionally loving it. It's like, it's here again. Holidays, birthdays. I get that comes in with my brother. I'm like, yeah, I'm a little off. It's this holiday. It's a December 6th was my brother's birthday. He died on December 28th. And what is there? Christmas. So that month of December from Thanksgiving to Christmas is heavy. And as soon as Christmas clears, it's light. And so I've just had to, but I miss it every year. It's like I'm in it. I'm like, what's going on? Why am I in a funk? And then I'm like, And as soon as I do, I give myself permission to be gentle, loving, find creative ways to be with that. And then it gets easier but it's just there. So it's like, that's my level 4 loss. Like, okay, this is just here. Be gentle. Be gentle. This is here again.
Yeah. You said something to me a while ago about trauma is your body's response, right? And that's been so helpful for me because sometimes I'll feel like I'm in a funk and I'm like, my body is reacting to something. So intellectually, I'll have, hey, I've reasoned my way through that. I've declared that glass is half full and not half empty. And done all of my wordsmithing that I can do to NLP my way through what I can do. But there is a there is a part of it that I'm starting to recognize that like, oh, and then if I feel it in my body and I can remember maybe where that trauma began or where the grief began or why, like the holiday that you just described, I can be more compassionate for myself. And I don't have to find a solution always. I can just be like, oh, there it is. Trying to zoom out, trying to be a little bit more detached from my reactivity, witnessing myself in that process.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up a lot. The definition I use is trauma is the body's reaction to either a real or a perceived. Yeah. Emotional or physical loss. Mm-hmm, so again, the body could have perceived something to be an emotional loss from childhood. That's why it's a never-ending thing, because you could have been pre-verbal in the womb before there's words, and the body perceives the loss of something that happened, and that's linked up. You have no cognitive memory. You can't say, "Oh, this happened there." The body just reacts, and so I use so yes, sometimes you can find it. Most often you can't. So I try to use the metaphor. Imagine when the storm comes. When it's snowing, how do you notice it's snowing? There's snow on the ground. That would be an example of if I'm in my head, I'm like, why is it snowing? And I'm running around my house like, why is it snowing? And I'm looking for a reason. And I'm going anxious. And then something happens and the snow goes away and it was the reason. But what if I just go, it's snowing. I got to put on snow clothes. I got to grab a shovel. And I just got to go take my time shoveling the driveway. I'm going to be a little slower, a little bit later. And the snow may keep snowing for days, weeks, but eventually the sun will come out again. And so if we can start to reframe, I see the signals with the body's reacting, stabilize the nervous system, get into my practices to get into feel what's here, is the metaphor of putting on clothes and shoveling the driveway, because it's slow. It's like sticky, slow. But to me, that the deeper and deeper I get into it, that's how it starts to become, is where it's just like a somatic reaction. And then you be with the somatic and then it gets better. One other frame I have on that is just my own personal theory on this, is I believe that's how we grow. So I believe the universe is just full of contraction, expansion. And so in order to grow, we have to contract. So that's what's happening, is in order to contract, we go back through the wounds to contract, which is the dissolution of our identity. And then that dissolution happens through grief. And then when we expand again, we come out as a bigger version of ourselves. So another way of change.
I feel like you're articulating my last 24 hours.
is, hey, I wanted to grow. So the reframe is, when I'm in contraction, I'm about to have a huge breakthrough. Yeah. And the more I can lean into the contraction and grieve, the more I get out of me trying to understand
leads to birth.
Leads to birth. That's it.
That's cool.
And the sun.
A lot of squeezing.
Thanks for listening today, fellas. If you got value from this episode, I ask that you take 1 second right now and you share this with another dad in your life that you respect, that you know is committed to becoming a better man, family man, and businessman. And on that note, I want to honor you for choosing growth. Your family will thank you years from now for all the effort that you're putting in to learn the strategies so you can show up more fully for them today. Take care.